Okay, so you've run your first draping simulation. We've draped the hair down really nicely. It came down nice and smooth, but it's not done yet. We want to make it, even it up and make it look good. So let's jump back to that tool that is your best friend that I talked about before, the push tool, to make sure that now the draping should have, because the collision was enabled for an offset of 0.05, it should not have draped and fallen through the head at all, but it might be too close. And so let's use our push tool. Oh, I made a mistake. Oh, it's a good thing I made a mistake. I love this mistake actually because I do it all the time. Once you've done the drape, if you don't convert it, then you try to use any other tool and it'll bounce back to where it was before you draped it. So let's drape it again. And we'll just wait a moment. There it is. Now we'll convert it. Now I can select any tool I want, and it doesn't bounce back. This is it's going to be its default position. So let's use the push tool again, and we will push it up. There we go. Now we know it's not going through anything. It's off everywhere. It's even off of the shoulders and what have you. It's not pushed through anything. And we can see here that there is some unevenness going on. And so let's clean that up with our cut tool. Let's talk about the cut tool. It's just like you would expect when you're going to the barber shop and cutting your hair. It will cut the selected hairs. Now nothing's selected. Well, if nothing's selected, then it cuts whatever I put it over. And that might be easiest, but I was going to actually select all hair and cut it that way. Now before I start to cut things too much here to get it down, you'll notice that some of them are too short. We need them longer if they're going to all sort of look even in the frame. Some of them are coming from farther away on the scalp, and so they're just looking too short. And so rather than cut things, let's grow them all. Let's grow them like crazy, and then we'll cut it all back. And we can do that with our hair length tool. Now this one is another one that's kind of screwed up on the default. It's set to 0 as a default. So obviously all that would happen if I touch the hair now and start to try to apply it is that it would scale everything back to 0. So let's take it up to, let's say, 1.4 feet, and we will I got to see how the little region that it covers is very small. If I wanted to do a hair at a time, I could, like this. Just hover over that region, you see those hairs grow, but I want to do them all. So I'm going to make the radius back to big so it covers the whole head. And now everything, when I hold it down, it all grows out. And you can see that it's grown right through the model in several places. And boy, that looks wild and woolly now, so we're going to need to cut that back quite a bit, which just gives us more opportunity to play with the cut tool. So let's jump back to the cut tool. Now take a look at the tool settings for the cut tool. This one is checked by default, and that might be wise and it might not. It means that it only applies to visible guide hairs. So only what I can see can I cut. And the reason this might be a problem is, see, there's some things that are inside the model I can't see them, and if I can't see them, I can't cut them, because I can only cut where the point is on the end. So I'd have to be able to scale it back. So I'm going to uncheck that so that I can cut right through even the invisible areas and get this back up into a region that makes sense to me. Actually, I'll do the back first. It's easier. Let's get it right on up there. Right on up. Very good. Not going for perfection here, but I do want it to be outside of the model mostly. Something is still in there. Alright, now it looks like it might be too short there, like I might have cut that back too much, but remember when I grew it, it also bouffantted it out, so there's actually more to drape there, and it should come back down. Let's drape it again. Remember where we drape is in the Dynamics tab, Drape All. Thinks about it, drapes it on down. Oh, look at that guy, he's way longer than I thought he would be. Got some more cutting to do here. I'm going to push it out again. This time I'm not going to... Oh, I messed it up again. Forgot to convert. See, this is good that I do this, so you'll see that this is a common mistake. Easily rectifiable, it's not a big deal. Convert, and now we'll go back to the push tool again, and we're going to push it out. I'm going to adjust it a little bit. I don't want to push it quite as far. 0.3 seems about right to me. I'm going to apply that, and now we'll go back to the cut tool, even this up again, now that we got more of a true idea of what the links are. And I don't know, I think that's pretty good. All right, I think we're in business here. This is looking pretty good. So let's go over to the other room and take a look at what it looks like. I bet it's going to be just perfect, and there'll be no flaws whatsoever, and it will look great. Except, oh no, it doesn't look great. It looks more like that scary Japanese little girl from The Ring has come to crawl through my television and kill me, if anyone's seen that movie. If not, then I apologize for the obscure reference, although it doesn't seem like it's that obscure. Anyway, this is because all of this loose hair can only follow the guide hairs that is nearby within a certain radius. And if it's not near enough to one of those guide hairs, it doesn't know where to go. So it just sort of falls wherever gravity takes it, which in this case was right through the head and through the neck. It's harder to see that, but it's just no good. We've got to fix that. But it's a really quick and easy fix. And that's the good news. It's on the General tab. We scroll down to the... What did I do? Oh, I can't believe I did that. I was using my mouse wheel and I accidentally... Oh, this is probably good too. I put the segments per hair down to 1. So now there's only just one straight line for every segment. I'm putting it back to 30, but doing that, this is actually a good thing that this happened, because this is going to be another useful tool that you need to know about. Putting it back to 30, it still looks pretty straight. It's straight, but it's got 30 segments. And when I change the segment count, it sort of threw randomly all the segments in there. They're not necessarily even to each other in length. So there might be a real long spot that's one segment, and then like 7 or 8 that are clustered together. And you can imagine that would really mess up your simulations, because the hair wouldn't act like it's all the same along its length. It would act like it's stiff up here and really loose down here, and what have you. We want to correct that too. So there is a tool that does that, and it's a really easy tool to use, and it's one that you may forget that you have. So right here, it's called the, let me hover over it so I get the name right, Even Hair Segments tool. And all you have to do is have the hair selected, which it already is, but if it wasn't, I could just go to Hair and select all, and then I just click on Even Hair Segments. And while I can't really see much difference, I know that it now has all of those segments are equal size to each other, and so now the hair will deform as it should correctly. But it's still sticking through the head. What can we do about that? I'm sure that those who are paying attention are going to be ahead of me and saying our best friend, the push tool, can correct this in just a moment. So let's push it outside of the head to 0.03 feet. Kaboom. And now it's not draped correctly any longer. It's forced its way through areas that it shouldn't. So I'm going to straighten the hair. This is a tool that I don't use too much. Not the hair length. No. Straighten tool. There it is. And I'll just, oh, come on. Hair, select all, straighten it out. That sort of brings it back up to where it was when I first brushed it, or close to it, close enough that we can make that work. And I'm going to need to brush it again too. I really messed it up when I did that, when I shortened the hair segments. But again, easy fix, so not a big deal. Let's knock it all back. And keep knocking it back. We don't want it all too twisted up or anything. If it does get twisted, it should sort of fall through itself, but we do have a smooth tool that can untwist things too if it comes to that. Alright, I might have knocked something through the skull, so I'm going to go back and use the push tool once again. Make sure that it is outside of the skull. Then I'm going to drape all. It's got 100 iterations by default here. You could make that less, 50 or what have you. If you had more complex hair, you might want to do that. If you had more guide hairs, you didn't want to wait a really long time, but it's not like it takes a long time, so I'm fine with it myself. Now when I draped it that time, it looks not quite as even, so I'm going to convert that to make sure that it stays in that shape. Hit the cut tool, even it up just a bit, just a touch here and there. That looks good. Again, in real life, nothing is absolutely even, so we want a little bit of variance. And we're going to use our best friend, the push tool. Make sure that it's been pushed from the skull a decent length. Now back to the problem at hand, which, if you'll recall, before I made that mistake, was that the free hair was falling through the figure. And this is correctable down at the bottom of the general tab in this section that is unchecked by default, because that's really a stupid setting. It should be checked by default. It's called auto grouping, and what this does is it tells those loose hairs, freedom is an illusion. You will follow a guide hair. Just because you're not really close to a guide hair, you're going to follow the closest one, and it will follow based upon the distance or the angle or the distance along, or any combination of those to the guide hair. So I like to use distance along at about 3.3 or 3.4 ish. Now let's see what it looks like. And yay, we've got ourselves a hairstyle that is draped and looks pretty good, and it's on our V4. Let's do a real quick test render. Hey, not looking bad. Not looking bad at all. We're getting there already. Really, we're pretty much almost all the way there. Now, there is some things I want to draw your attention to. Not to worry about this big broad stripe in the middle here, because I think that would be the first thing you would think of is, looks like she's going bald in the middle of her head. Well, there's a couple of easy fixes for that. If you want to be especially precise, like for a still render, then you can go to the hair group that you just built, and instead of 5,000 hairs, we can change that to 25,000 hairs, and now there's more hair there all over the head. What did I... Oh, I was already in the... I was trying to get back to the assembly room, but I was already in the assembly room. I lose track sometimes, folks. So let's take a look at what that looks like now that we've added 5 times the number of hairs. This probably would go 10 times faster in the render room, but it is more hairs that it's rendering, so there's more for it to calculate. And you can see right away that just upping the number of hairs, it's no longer looking like a bald spot. It's looking a lot more like it normally would in a part of hair of that type. But the downside to adding more hairs is that your renders will take longer, because it's calculating more hairs. Obviously, it's not calculating more hairs for the simulation, because the simulations are all just still based on the guide hairs, which we already have a very limited number of. But it is, for rendering purposes, that might be a little bit much. And while that didn't seem like much in when we rendered it, if we were rendering out an animation of 96 frames, and each frame could be rendered in 1 second or 5 seconds, you can see that would stack up. And for the purposes of learning how the dynamic hair shifts and moves, it's ideal to do a different fix for this than upping the hair count. Although you can, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's the more physically correct way to do it. But there is this lovely little invention. I'm going to make the hair invisible so that we can see it, that Daz has provided for us as part of Carrara, and it is in the Objects tab. It should be under the Hair section, wherever that is in your Objects tab. And if you've got pre-purchased hairs like I do, it could be down in the mix, but look for the one that's directly from Daz, and it's the Daz hair cap. Now all this little thing is, it's no big deal to it at all, but it is, I'm going to turn off the V4 proxy invisibility. I'm going to turn on the visibility of our Victoria 4. And all you do with the little Daz hair cap is drag it and drop it onto the head, and it inserts exactly what it sounds like. It is a hair cap. It's basically a little vertex dome object with some morphs in it, so you can have some variation, that sits on top of the head. Now, because my character has a big head in comparison to regular Victoria 4, I have to do a little adjusting to pull it into place. Just zip it up just a little bit there. That looks about right. I don't really care about the width because the hair is going to cover that. The only part I really care about is right there at the center, where it looks sort of sparse, if you will. And we can turn back on our hair. Let's make the whole proxy visible so you see how this is done. The proxy is visible, but we go to the model section of the proxy and make that invisible, and that will just leave the hair. If we make it visible, the hair will actually still be visible. Now you notice when we put that hair cap on there, it doesn't really cover the whole region of hair that we need it to, but there are some morphs that are built in that Daz has provided on this hair cap that help with that. So if we needed to take the temples back, we could do that. Can't really see it because the hair is in the way, but for the purposes of this, we want to move the hairline. Where is it? My eye is not seeing it. There it is. Of course, it's right next to what I was doing. And you see as I shift that, it actually pulls the hairline forward. I could go farther forward, but we want a little sparseness right at the beginning so it doesn't look like it just immediately turns into a full head of hair right where the hair starts. We want the strands to show. And then if you do a test render on that at 5,000 hairs, it's not quite exactly like I would want. I might add another guide hair that's a little closer because it's kind of pulling these center hairs out a little bit more than I'd like. But you see that you see the principle in effect, that it basically fixes that problem. And for animations, a low hair count like this with a hair cap is absolutely the way to go, because your eye cannot, as if she's moving around, your eye cannot see this hair cap. You just see that it's sort of filled in a dark area that's sort of like hair roots would be anyway. All right, we're going to pause there, and then in our next section we're going to set up an animation and we're going to see this hair in action.